Hello everyone and welcome to Network Playroom. In this video, we're going to talk about Python tuples. As with the previous videos, we'll discuss some theory and also look at examples on the Python interpreter here. Let's go. So tuples and lists are very similar. The biggest difference between the two comes down to mutability. Now if you remember, Python data types are either mutable or immutable. In other words, you can't change certain data types without creating a new object or reassigning the value. Now lists are mutable and tuples are immutable. So why exactly would you need these two types if they are so similar? Well, it all comes down to how Python accesses objects and data in memory. Now, when you have a lot of changes occurring, a mutable data structure is preferred because you don't have to create a new object every time you need to store different values. But when you have a value that is constant and referenced in multiple parts of a program, an immutable data type, such as a tuple, is more memory efficient and easier to debug. Now you also don't want some other part of your program to make changes to a crucial piece of data stored in a mutable data type. Now to create a tuple, you use parentheses instead of square brackets, which is what you use with lists. So let's use the same example as we had in the lists video. So we use colors. So let's do the same thing here, but instead of making a list, we're gonna make a tuple. So we had blue, pink, and purple. Like so. And by the way, you can use the type function to identify a Python data type that you have created. So let's try that with the tuple that we have just created. So we can do type and then colors. So you can see that it is identified as a tuple. Now you can access data in a tuple in the same way as in a list by using the brackets and the index value of the item in the tuple that you want to return. So let's say we want to return the first color from our tuple. So we can do colors, square brackets, and the index. And similarly, we could do the same with the other colors as well. Just like that. Now, as I mentioned, you can change the items in a tuple. So let's try that on the Python interpreter here. Let's try to reassign a value in our tuple, and you will see that it is not allowed. Python will give you an error. So let's try to replace the first color. So we'll replace blue with jade. So you see this lovely error message in red that it is not allowed. So there is actually a sneaky workaround how you can change items in a tuple, but it requires some tricks. And it is important to bear in mind that you can't directly change the items, as I've just demonstrated. But here's what you can do. So you can convert the tuple into a list, change the list, and then convert the list back into a tuple. Let's look at an example. So to make this happen, we have to use two Python built-in methods called list and tuple. In short, first we have to convert the tuple to a list and then back to a tuple once we've made the changes. So we actually have to create another object, and let's call it shade because it rhymes with jade and also because this is somewhat of a shady method. So let's say shade equals list and colors. So what this does is we're converting the colors tuple into a list called shade. So you see that it includes those colors, and if we use the type function again, we can verify that this is actually a list. So now we can replace the first item. So we can do shade and then make that jade. Like so. And now if we return the list again, you see it's now jade, pink, and purple. Then we convert this list back to a tuple. So we do colors equals tuple and then shade. So you see that we're actually reassigning the values. So now if we do colors again, you see that it includes jade, pink, and purple. And once again, we can use the type function to verify. So you can see that it is a tuple. Next, let's look at something interesting. So to create a tuple with only one item, you have to add a comma after the item, otherwise Python will not recognize it as a tuple. Let's look at an example. So if I do A equals, and then I try to create a tuple with one item, let's say apple, and then I return that so-called tuple, which it's actually not. Because now if we use the type function again, you see that it is a string. So if we truly want to create a tuple with only one item in it, we have to use that comma. So let's create another tuple called B and assign a banana to it. So here we include the comma and then close the parentheses, like so. And again, let's use the type function. So now you can see that it is actually a tuple. The other interesting part is that Python recognizes an empty tuple without any gimmicks. So you can do C equals empty tuple, and there's no problem whatsoever. You can see that it is a tuple. Now here's something great that you can do with tuples. So you can actually use tuples to assign a set of variables very quickly. So we can do something like x, y, z equals, let's come up with some random stuff. I'll include an integer here, so 7, then some fun words like planet and galaxy. Okay. So now if we pull those variables, you see that those values got assigned to them. Like so. Now finally, Python has only two built-in methods that you can use on tuples. The first one is count, which returns the number of times a specified value occurs in a tuple. And the second method is index, which searches the tuple for a specified value and returns the position of where it was found. So let's look at an example. Let's create a random tuple with some random items in it, and we'll repeat some of them so we can demonstrate the count function. So let's say 7 3 times, and then let's include some network related words like router, switch, and firewall, for example. Okay, let's just check these real quick again. So now let's use the count function to figure out how many times number 7 occurs on this tuple. So we can do f count and then specify the value, which is 7. So it returns 3, which means that number 7 is in the tuple 3 times. So let's try out the index method. So we can do f index, and let's say we want to find out where router is. So you can see that it also returns 3, and the reason is because it is in index 3. So if you look at this, 0, 1, 2, 3. So if we had used switch, it should return 4. Like so. Alright, that's it for this video. Hope this information has been helpful to you. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.